All right, hard yarners.
Hello.
Yes, John's back. You guys must be getting sick of John. He's just taken over. Very incredible episode today.
That's
great. We won't talk about what we've talked about yet, but we would like to thank the sponsors of today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Raunchy Brewing Co. They have a beer that actually tastes good.
Quite a good beer.
It's actually good. I was going to say, but it is actually good. I do like the taste. And
when do I get my next free couple of cans?
I actually got to hit up in to get some more in because we don't have a fridge in here at the moment. But we'll get some more Raunchies. It's bloody good. They got stouts, they got pale ales, and they got lagers. The lager's my favourite. So get involved. And more importantly, we got alltradescover.com.au. If you'd like anything to do with trades, to have your business covered.
Public liability, personal accident, tool cover, just give the guys a call.
100%, because I'll tell you what, there's going to be... I constantly... And I was a tradie. Did you know this about me? I was a tradie. So
are you the one that hung the sign?
I was the one who hung the sign.
Is it straight? Do you think it's straight or is that the camera?
It's a little bit off.
I can see why you switched to podcasting.
So I used Delby as my eye. I was like, let's put it. But I used to be a tradie, and I seen a lot of accidents. And I seen a lot of not just physical accidents. I've seen a lot of accidents that happen to things that happen on site. And I think it's definitely worth having.
Look, a lot of people just get on site and then they get told they need a certificate of insurance to get their paycheck. So we're pretty quick and easy when that comes along.
100%. We really do appreciate the beautiful sponsor that you can see behind there. So thank you very much, All Trades Cover. And
thanks to Sophie.
Yes.
What a chat.
Sophie.
Camel takeover has begun.
We have become the Camel podcast of Australia, if you'd like to know anything about camels. But incredible chat. Again, another adventurer who's travelled across Australia with camels. So
what do we touch on?
Yeah, what do we chat about today?
Oh, losing camels.
Losing camels. We went quite deep in places actually.
Yeah, a bit of resilience.
Yeah, a bit of resilience and a bit of taking each day at a time, and
a
bit of hunting and sourcing meat and
then
solitude.
Everyone's got a camel trek inside them.
Yeah, we've all got a monster inside of us.
Yes.
Very good. Good fun episode. I enjoyed that. And our listeners love these episodes. The adventure episodes are going off with the downloads. So it's going to go very well. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Thank
you need to get on a plane. So
got to fly back east.
Yeah, perfect. But thanks again. And let's get hard.
Let's get hard.
Welcome to Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Delby.
And Cameron Branch.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
Cool. We can launch into and annihilate as much as we want, as Ben Cousins famously said. But yeah, cool. Thanks for joining us, Sophie.
Thanks for having me.
You come from a recommendation from my co-host.
Well, I'm just trying to outnumber you with camel people. It's a slow takeover.
This has slowly just become your podcast.
It's going to become just a camel podcast eventually.
Yeah, exactly. We've eliminated Delby for a few months, and now I'll be next.
Don't get too comfortable.
Well, to begin with, let's just talk about who you are and why you have some similarities to John over here.
To John. Well, I guess John and I are part of a pretty small club.
Pretty exclusive, yeah.
Not many entries
No,
either. Not many application forms.
I don't know why. But we're part of a small club that has walked across Australia with camels.
Which is, I feel so weird being in
Are you part of that club?
in a room with two of yous. Also, and this happened with Jeff the other day. Jeff, you spoke with as well at the talk the other night, and I feel like I'm a pretty resilient, sort of tough person, and do love to do hard things. I constantly preach, the resilience and I've done the 100 kilometres. I think that's really hard, And then you guys are in this room now, and then Jeff the other day, I was like, I feel kind of like not insignificant, but definitely compared to you guys, what you guys have been through and what you guys do.
Trust me, I couldn't run 100k. No way.
But it's just one day. Like, that's 14 hours of pain, whereas you guys have done some. Like, how long was your trek?
So I walked for 13 months, so split across 2 years. So I basically did 6 months of walking and then braked for the summer because it gets too hot to walk in the outback.
Yep.
And then did another 7 months walking. So
John's just going.
it's more of a totally.
Yeah.
I went in a rather more of a straight line than John. I think John's intention was to go in a straight line. I remember hearing about John and being like, oh, okay, so he's going to walk east to west. And I thought that he would finish before me. But then he took a bit of a detour and went to all of the states.
Started a year before and finished a year after. So
wow, that's crazy. So where does it begin? Where does this idea? Because I tried getting this like off John, and I get an idea of now why he did it. For the whole just adventure side of adventure things. Yeah. But where does it come for you? Like, where does that happen? Like, why camels?
Yeah.
Like, what's the thought process?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of a question I get asked a lot, and I think people sort of just think because people think it's such an out there idea, and camels are so different for so many people. That's something they've never had anything to do with.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, how did you just get up and have this light bulb moment kind of thing?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
But I guess, there was never a point that it was a light bulb moment. It was just a slow progression of things that happened in my life. And then, it actually seemed like a very normal idea to do something like that.
So was this a thing where you'd, because I'll keep referring back to John's story. Mm-hmm. John had no experience with camels, nothing, but just went with them. Did you have a prior experience?
Yeah, so I came at it a little bit differently. So I originally was working in film and TV about 4 years before I set off on my camel trek.
Yeah.
So I guess I started from nothing back then.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to take a little bit of a break from the industry. I thought I would just try find a summer job. I wanted to do something a bit more with animals.
Yeah.
And I was over at my dad's place having dinner one night, and he said, I've been reading, I was always interested in farming. He's got a small farm, and he said, I've been reading about there's people that milk camels. I was like, oh, really? That's pretty cool and random. And then I was talking about it with a friend in that I'd gone to high school with, and she piped up and she was like, that's my auntie. Yeah, she's the crazy camel lady. She milks camels. And I was like, how the hell have I never heard about this? You never mentioned camels once.
Yeah.
And I sort of, I don't know, I guess I thought that was interesting. Yeah. And so I asked her if I could go to her crazy auntie's farm.
Yeah. And
I went up there, and there was about 100 camels on the property, and I'd never really had anything yet. I'd gone for a ride, at a fair on some camels when I was, only 5 years old or something like that. Yeah. Otherwise, I'd had nothing to do with them. And I got to this farm, and all of these camels just surrounded us, and they were just so friendly. Like, they were like big puppy dogs, basically. They came in and they were resting their heads in my arms, and they just wanted cuddles and pats, and and they're huge as well, camels. They're much bigger than a horse. Yeah. So it sort of seems a bit intimidating, and camels have this way of, they love to get to know you face to face. Unlike any other animal, it's like they bring their face down and they basically smell your face with their face. And a lot of people go, oh my God, are they going to bite me? Yeah. But they just really want to get a sense of who you are.
Do
I
remember you saying that with trying to get them to accommodate to you? You have to let them come to you?
Yeah, and that's part of the training process of them, is eventually their curiosity is going to outweigh their fear.
Yeah.
And then the telltale sign that they're starting to overcome that hurdle is when they start to come in for that sniff, which is almost like the camel handshake.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely like the camel handshake. I like that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of almost love it first sniff or love it first sight.
You sniff back. You shook their hand back.
Pretty much. And I thought they were fascinating, and so I thought, well, I might, try and get a bit of work at this place, and I started volunteering there, and then, it was kind of crazy. I was like every weekend driving an hour to basically go rake camel shit. I was that fascinated by these animals, and then before long I started milking, and that took over from film and TV, and all of a sudden I was a full-time camel milker. And originally I thought I would just do it for 6 months and then go back to my real job, and it was all of a sudden 4 years later, and I didn't go back to film and TV. So,
but having a fascination for camels is one thing. That's cool. But then deciding to walk across Australia, and I said this to John last time, it's you could potentially die. Where does it go from I like hanging out with camels, I'll milk them, I'm fascinated by them, to right, fuck it, let's risk our life for some sort of adventure? What happens there?
Well, so after the dairy, I wanted to learn more about the riding and the trekking side of things. I'd grown up riding horses, and so I went to work in the Flinders Ranges doing tourist treks down there, and then from the Flinders I went to Uluru and started working doing the tours there. And I guess all through this period of time I'd started to read about the early explorers and exploring parts of Australia with camels. And I grew up in Brisbane, I lived in other countries as well, but I'd never had anything to do with the outback. And it was kind of like the camels were just this window into this part of Australia that I had no experience with. And it kind of opened up this world of the outback and the deserts in Australia. And I thought, I really want to go and see that for myself.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, all these other people have used camels in the past to go on these big walks and adventures, and they're, the perfect animal.
Yes.
Basically, they carry a lot of weight.
Yeah.
You can't go walking across the country carrying your own stuff.
Yeah.
And they can go a whole lot longer without water than a horse.
They hold a lot.
I heard them described once as like a horse designed by a committee. So it's like the committee's got together and gone, no, we need to go longer without water, increase their carrying capacity and just put on all these tack-ons and features.
Yeah. They're amazing. It's like every single part of them is designed, for hot, arid conditions.
They are introduced, aren't they? From where do they originate?
Well, originally they called the camel handlers the Gans, but really they were all the way from Afghanistan through to India, and the camels from the same kind of region as well.
Okay.
So
they're pretty arid, dry area.
Yeah, exactly. And so they basically they were brought out to Australia to help open up these parts of the outback. All the bullock teams and donkey teams and horse teams couldn't make it that far into arid areas, and so they realised these camels had been pretty good on with the exploration parties like Burke and Wills and so on. Yeah, and so they brought them out to do a bit to carry huge wool packs and things for export, and also fencing equipment and everything else into these far-flung areres, and and then eventually they were superseded when trucks came in, and so it was kind of funny. They were the trucks originally, I guess. The
trucks of the desert.
They were trucks of the desert, and they sort of paved all these roads for then an actual truck and trains and so on to come in and take over from them. And
there's still little remnants, like the size of a wool bale. Still to this day, so it's 160 to 200 odd kilos. Yeah. It's very odd size, shape and weight. You can't really manhandle it yourself. Yeah. But that's the size of what was recommended to carry on either side of a camel.
Really?
So even though the camel's gone, the wool bale price is still set on what a camel will carry, which is pretty cool.
That's incredible.
And they used to have strings. Like I've read, they had strings of 70 camels in a row, these guys, and it would be two guys handling them. Yeah. So it was, pretty amazing what they did with camels. And
so I guess it was really just that sense of adventure that and we're finding that commonly with a lot of people, that's the lack, obviously with this, you both of you and Jeff, the sense of adventure is something that, but I think everyone has that.
Totally. And for me, it was sort of, I think it was, it was the right period of time in my life. I was in my early 30s. I hadn't really done it. I basically hadn't done a whole heap of adventuring in the past, but I was starting to get a taste for it. I'd started to do a couple of multi-day hikes, and I started to have that feeling of like, I want to prove myself, you know, out in the bush on my own. And that was a big part of it too, is doing something on my own as a woman and knowing, you know, that I was capable enough.
And do you have a history with this? Like, is it something that when you pose this idea to your friends and family, are they like, oh, it was, you know, eventually going to happen, something like this? Or were they like, all right, this is a bit of a hard left for you, you know?
Good question, John.
I think I'd come up with heaps of harebrained schemes. I was kind of like, oh yeah, like when I go over to South America, I'm going to get horses and do this big horse trek, and you know, I don't know, none of them had stuck. And so I think when I said, I'm going to get some camels, I'm going to walk across the country with camels, they were like, oh yeah, that's a nice idea. You know, my mum's like, oh, that's a nice idea, darling, and you know, and then it would just sort of fizzle off, and it would never happen, and then it did. Yeah, for some reason it just stuck, and it was kind of like once I'd got those camels and started to train the camels, it was like I was on this invisible treadmill, and it was kind of at that point I was like, I don't think I can even get out of this.
And don't you think it's one of those things when you commit to something, and it's very easy to say, I'd love to do this, I'd love to do that. I used to do it all the time. My mates would joke, I'm a gunner man. Like, I'm a gunner man, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it got a point where I got embarrassed. I was like, I do keep saying this shit.
I do keep saying
I'm going to do something.
You get pulled up on it, totally.
And then I was like, nah, fucking go do it. Yeah. And now I'm probably the opposite. I'm like, and Delby jests sometimes. He's like, we say we're going to do stuff with the pod and blah, blah, blah. And there are things that we don't go through with. But 90% of what we say we're going to do, we at least have a fucking crack at. And even like traveling, like the whole idea of traveling by yourself. Like I'm going to Europe for nothing like what you've done, obviously, but I'm going to Europe, and just the idea a few years ago of traveling by myself, solo, alone, was a pretty daunting thing, because you're like, I have to talk to people, I have to get to know people. But now it's like, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to Austria, I'm going to Salzburg, I'm just going to go climb some mountains by myself for a few days. Like, that's exciting me more than anything.
Totally. And I'd always had that like travel bug, you know. I grew up traveling. My parents travel a lot. We moved to different countries, and it was just, this was almost, I guess, in a way, an extension of that. I was like, I want to see this part of Australia that I've never seen. And it was just like, oh, well, I happen to be working with camels, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that, and I think, you know, part of the thing that got me stuck into it too is I'd been in a pretty serious relationship at the time, and then it had kind of started to crumble in a way because of this obsession with wanting to do this trip. Yeah. So once that relationship started to crumble, I was kind of like, I have to do it. Like I've sort of lost this because of that.
Well, and I was going to ask that before, because you just met your partner. Not the partner that was...
Not the partner that just came in here.
She did a swap. Okay. one out on the beginning, and then just picked up a new one on the way. You know, like.
So did you have
was not my intention, John.
Did you have a partner through, like, during the trip or during the process? Because that's a big thing.
That's it. Yeah. So my ex-boyfriend Sam, who I write about in my book, and it was a huge part of my life. But then I had made this decision to walk across the country with camels, and our lives were just going in different directions. You know, I was spending more and more time in the outback, and it was becoming a long distance relationship, and things were crumbling. So then when we did finally break up, it kind of gave me this window of
like a green
time
light.
And light, in my life.
And I think when you got to lift everything on and off the camel every day, you got to avoid excess baggage. So she,
But that's obviously, because that would have been a challenge regardless if you're going to try and do a trip like this. You know, you battled with not seeing. You battled with not seeing your son because he lives overseas. But like being away from family and stuff like that would have been just bad enough as it is. Like parents or kids or I don't know, whatever you...
Well, throwing COVID is what sort of crept up all of a sudden when I left. You know, I actually thought, you know, after I realised that Sam, my ex-partner, was definitely not interested in joining me on the trip, I'd sort of thought, oh, maybe I'll have other people, you know, come along and might come for a time here and there, and, you know, I'll have enough camels that I'll have enough to be able to carry other people's gear, and it was almost like everything was going on in my life that was saying, you need to do this on your own. Like, this needs to be your own trip. Oh. And COVID was a massive one of those. So not even my dad could. I basically trucked the camels into Western Australia, and then a week later, everything blew up with COVID. It was at March 2020, and I actually got locked into the state that I was going to start in, and then all of the smaller regions started to get locked down too, and everything was up in the air, and I wondered whether I was even going to be able to start.
So was there a lot of fear around that solo element? Because, like, just to describe to some of the listeners here, I start on the East Coast and I'm straight town hopping. You know, people are calling it a glorified pub crawl. So I might not have had friends along with me, but I was making them in every town, and the gaps just got bigger along the way. So I eased my way into the solitude of the trip.
I did not.
And old Soph, like, 1 minute is planning a trip with her boyfriend, and the next minute she's in the middle of the Western deserts completely by herself during a drought and during COVID. So like,
it's almost the cliche finding yourself sort of trip. Is that almost what it felt like? Because that solitude is...
Or was that forced into it? Like, really?
Yeah.
It was in a way forced into it, I think. Like, I wasn't never like, I guess I wanted to test how tough I was, but I don't think I even knew how tough it was going to be.
Yeah.
I was totally naive. Like, setting off, I don't know, I just didn't realise how vast and how remote WA especially would be.
Yeah, where did you set off from?
From Shark Bay, so just north of Geraldton,
top,
So I have this distinct memory of I was sitting in the truck when we were coming from Uluru, and we came, when I say we, it was me and my friend Greg, who I was working with at Uluru Camel Tours. He helped me truck the camels over, and we drove the Great Central Road over, which is a pretty remote road. It's one of those roads that's always on outback truckers and things. And I remember just sort of coming up this rise and then just seeing all of this mulga as far as the eye could see.
Mulga?
So mulga's it's like the predominant sort of tree out in the outback. It's a type of acacia tree. It's
great firewood. Great firewood.
Acacia tree. Does that?
If you've got a chainsaw.
So like something I was not carrying.
Does the acacia tree, just side note, is that the one that has traces of like DMT or
the highest traces, my friend?
Oh my lord!
How did I not know this?
You'd have to know the correct way to like extract it and
just trial and error.
A lot of time alone out there.
But to come from like to Shark Bay is incredibly beautiful. Just the bay itself, the water,
beautiful.
And then to leave there, and then
and then it was a reality check. Because all of that mulga that I'm talking about, it's very sort of
bland,
grey.
Yes,
bland grey brown, and it's dense actually, which what you don't realise is, you know, you think, it's a sort of vast empty space, but it's actually sort of like a flat forest.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in this flat forest, it's like it's suffocating almost. Like there's not even a rise to get up to be able to see out. You just feel like you're just lost in this endless forest, and when you're out of it, you're on a dirt road that's just heading dead straight into the horizon with nothing else, and thinking, oh my God, it's going to take a bloody long time to go step by step down that road.
And the mulga tree as well. So they call the king brown snake the mulga snake. Because if you get a scratch and it kind of the mulga tree gets into your skin,
it's got a sort of and
it can replicate some of the symptoms that you have when you get bitten by the mulga snake.
Yeah, Aboriginal people used to make it into spears, and they used to
Really?
spear, animals with it because it actually, it had an effect on them that would,
Oh, wow.
create a
Fuck.
wound that went septic.
So
Speaking of snakes and stuff, because that's got to be a huge issue, and I can't remember. I'm sure we would have talked about it, but snakes and stuff like that must be on your mind.
Actually, weirdly not. It's one of the most common questions I get, and I don't have any cool snake story to come up with it because it's mainly wintertime when you're walking, so all of the snakes in hibernation. And I think although camels are quite silent with those big soft pads that they have, there's probably actually quite a bit of vibration that's going into the ground to sort of scare snakes away. So actually, the only time I saw snakes was if I stopped at I think once when I stopped at a homestead. And it was like in the hay shed or something like that.
So one of the other things that I think listeners got to understand, I'm a 90-odd kilo guy.
Yeah.
Sophie's everything of... when I first saw you on the camel track, you were down to like 50 kilos.
Wow.
Something.
I'm a big fatty now.
And I think you've put on some good condition. That really limits what you can take, what you can do. Like I can have bags up to your weight. You can't lift a bag of your own weight on and off every day. So you had a very different style camel track to what I had. Like
Hugely different.
I think you got to run through with people like how basic you lived for that year.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I thought I was carrying a lot of gear, but until I met John, then I realised, how toned down mine was.
Glamping.
I mean, I didn't even take a chair. Like I lived for 2 years basically without a chair.
Not a fold up.
Like I think John had like enough for like a whole party.
That's on you.
I was kind of like, I went very minimal. John took a fridge on his camels. There was no fridge for me. There was many cans of tuna and lentils and so on. We were literally just joking about it this morning. John was like, "Oh, it's so tough, when you have to stock up on all your meat and you're trying to work out when you're going to eat your ribeye or your roast and stuff."
She's like figuring out which flavoured can of tuna.
Maybe it's lemon and cracked pepper today, like it was yesterday.
I love those ones. What are they? The green sea ones?
Yeah.
But still, after a while, I'd be a bit over it.
Muesli every morning.
Oh, wow. What do you eat on because I guess that is part of it. We talked. You came across roadkill when you were desperate, I guess. But what is the staples of trying to survive through the outback?
The little bit of fresh stuff I took was like apples, oranges, sweet potato. That's the sort of stuff that keeps. The favourite items, a lot of Nutella.
Really?
Nutella's the best. I went through spoonfuls, especially when you're having a bad day and then you're just shoveling it, by spoonfuls.
Yeah, but wouldn't you be like
at the end of the
got to ration this? Like it's,
it becomes pretty serious by the end. The Nutella runs out pretty quick, and
the Kraft Parmesan cheese.
The Parmesan cheese, exactly. You sprinkle that on everything. But it was fantastic as well because, like I said, I was so skinny. I was just shredding kilos. So I was every curry or stew or anything I made, I was drowning it in olive oil and that Parmesan cheese and eating spoonfuls of Nutella for dessert. It didn't matter how much I ate. I was just losing it because there's on a camel trek. What I discovered is there's very little time when you're sitting, very little time when you're actually needing that chair. To be honest, because it's you're up first thing in the morning, you're letting your camels off to graze, and then most of the time, the biggest issue is that they wander. They love to wander, camels. So they, even though you put them in hobbles, which are little kind of cufflinks that go around their front legs and restricts their movement, they'll sometimes go several K morning and night when you're not on your walk, just looking for feed. And that was one of the biggest problems when I first started too. Is like John said, it was a shocking drought in WA, and so there was no food. And so not only was I skinny, my camels were skinny, and they were wandering.
Were you getting worried?
Seriously worried,
Because then it's not just you. You're like sitting there going, well, my camels could die. My camels could starve.
Oh, and it's the worst feeling. Like it feels like, I guess, if you're you take your kids on a hike. Not that I have kids, but they were like my big fluffy kids.
Yeah.
You know, you take your kids on a hike, and it's like, okay, you guys are going to carry all the backpacks, and then we get to camp, and it's like, sorry guys, there's no dinner for you, but I'll tuck in here and have some food. You know, you just feel terrible because they're doing so much work for you, and then you get to camp and you're like, there's nothing for them, and they're trying to eat some tough bit of thing, and then they're going, oh, that's not great, and then they wander another couple of K to find one little morsel, and especially in that dense foresty area, camels love to be able to see out and see a horizon, because I guess that's where, you know, they came from the wild, camels, and that's what they're used to. And so it's like they're constantly trying to escape this forest of mulga and get out to be able to see the horizon, and there's no escape from it, so they just constantly on the move trying to run away from you and from camp and from where you want to just sit down and chill out after having walked, you know,
and you've had
for hours.
You had a pretty full-on experience with nearly losing them.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. So I was probably about 2 months in, and it had been that first month was especially tough.
How far had you travelled or walked?
It'd probably be. I probably wouldn't have been up to 1,000 K by then. It probably would have been, I don't know, maybe 500 or so, 700 or something. And I was starting. Things had got a little bit better. I'd sort of gotten to the routine, and I was kind of chilling out a little bit more, and sort of thought, maybe after that first rubbish month, you know, maybe I'm actually enjoying this.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was this particular day I had it actually had rained the day before, and anyway, the next day I got up super early, and I thought, you know, I'll head off. I'd been annoyed the day before because everything was wet and soggy anyway. I was sort of thought, no, I'm going to change my opinion. You know, today's a new day. Going to have a great day. Set off down the road. Realised I'd gone the wrong way down the road. And I was
what
like,
do you mean? How does that happen?
I just stupidly hadn't sort of looked at the maps properly, and I was meant to take one dirt track this way, and I'd taken another dirt track that way.
Okay.
So I thought, it's all right, you know, nothing's going to get me down this day. I thought I'll just cut across the bush. I was sort of looking out into the bush, and it was looking a bit clearer. It was less foresty, and I thought, we'll be all right doing this. So I set off across not on a track, not anywhere, you know, ages away from the nearest town, and got right out there into the bush. I was singing to myself actually this day, you know, holding the lead rope by the end of the tip, and then my lead camel Jude, he saw a dark cow in the bushes. Nothing that you'd think would be scary, but to him apparently it looked like a monster.
Oh my God.
All of a sudden the rope went taut. I was all of a sudden pulled face first down on the ground along the dirt. The camels are, you know, trying to get away from me. I'm trying to get away from the cow, and eventually I couldn't hold them, and I just let go of the rope. Yeah. And I sort of could see all of this equipment starting to fall off. The swag was down on one side and so on. And anyway, I got up and I thought, oh my God, one of them is going to have broken their legs, but they were all up. And I thought at that point, oh, well, they'll just stop and I'll be able to, you know, grab the lead rope. But no, they just took off, bolted, absolutely bolted. And camels, they walk super slow, but I tell you what, when they start running, they can cover a lot of ground. And it was kind of this situation, because they're all roped together, they're all spooking one another. So my back camel, Mac, he's got the jerry cans flapping about on him, so he's running. The front camel, Jude's got the swag flapping around on him, so that's terrifying him more. And they're all just, you know, feeding off one another, running into the distance. Yeah. So there's nothing for it. So I start running after them, and as I'm running, I'm like, oh shit, the phone which I was using to navigate on, I've dropped when I fell over, and it's ages back, and I'm now in this, like I said, really disorientating flat bush, and I'm kind of like, already I have no idea where I am, which way that's happened. And then I start to realise, oh shit, I don't have the sat phone on me. I've packed that away in one of their saddlebags. I don't have my EPIRB on me, you know, that emergency press the red button. I don't have that on me. I don't even have water on me. I had put all of it on the camels. I wasn't carrying a Camelback or you know, a water bottle or anything like that.
All this is going through your head.
Literally, yeah, all I have is my tiny little pocket knife. And it was the first time, like you said, you know.
Oh, you'd be right then.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, like I guess I never sort of thought when I set off on the trip, I never thought that it would be a life and death situation. Like I just sort of thought, oh, well, I'll just go for a walk across the country with some camels.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden it sort of, it dawned on me. I was like, oh, shit, I'm actually in some, like this actually could be a life or death kind of situation. You know, and I'm starting to think, I was running and I could see there was tiny little pools of where the water had sat from the night before, and I'm like in my mind in this absolute panic trying to remember where these little pools of water are just in case I need to, like in case I can't get the camels back and I need to come back to these pools to drink from to survive. And I ran for I don't know how long, but I kept just getting sight of them, and then at one point I caught up to them and I got my little pocket knife out and I thought if I can at least just cut the rope between a couple of the camels and get hold of at least one at the back, you know, I've at least got something. And just as I went to do that, something spooked them again and they bolted and bowled me over and kept on going. So it was this, and I eventually...
How long are we into it now? Like how long have you been chasing these camels?
Them? I don't know. Like... I want to say an hour. Maybe it wasn't that. You know, it's one of those feelings where it feels like it goes on forever.
Still,
and I'm not
even 15, half an hour. Like that's a lot. In the desert.
Totally,
like not on a track.
Exactly.
When you're combining that mental and physical exhaustion at the same time, it doubles down and just hits you twice as hard.
And it's not that like going for a run where you're kind of like, okay, I'm just going to get into a rhythm of a jog. It's that running where you're like, I am running for my life kind of thing, and your lungs are burning. And
even just mentally thinking, what like the stuff you've lost. And
Yeah.
like, were you picking it up along the way, or were you like making notes of where it was because you're going to have to go back there and get it, or is it just gone?
It was just gone. I was just like, I just have to get these
So
camels
your phone
back.
that you were
Like,
using for navigation?
No
Gone.
idea. Gone.
Wow.
Totally off. So like, I just thought all I can do is get these bloody camels back because that they've got everything else on that I need.
So when they're dropping out of sight, you can still hear them? Or
So I was having to like pause every now and then. I'm sort of like try and hear over my own puffing and panting the sound of, because I was totally losing sight of them at times. They were going up and down these tiny little rises and you know, through bushes and stuff, and I could hear the sound of the jerry cans slapping around on Mac at the back, and that was the only way that I, you know.
Did you have bells on them during the day, or?
No, because I used to plug my bells. I think you used to walk with your bells dinging. Yeah, I used to plug them so that I didn't have that sound. So it was really only the sound of the equipment kind of bouncing around on them. So I got lucky. I caught them, and that was only because my lead camel, Jude, he sort of circled around a bush and kind of got tangled up in the bush and tangled the back camels into there too.
Okay.
And that was the only way that I caught them.
So it could have been a disaster. Like, what happens?
Well, I mean, it could be a disaster for them. You know, I mean, if they bolt and you don't find them, and you know they're all
tangled
roped up and you know it's not going to be a good situation for them. And you know, all of that stuff's going through your head, kind of like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to have to try somehow magically find where the hell the road is? I guess, you know, retrace my steps. But how long am I going to wait on the road for anyone to come? That could be days, because no one was travelling in COVID. No one was going down those roads, and they're remote roads anyway.
Yeah,
is this like
periods of like over a month where you wouldn't see a person out there?
Yeah.
And
no, I reckon in the whole first 6 months of walking that I did, I probably had about 6 cars pass me.
Well, judging by where you also said you sort of walking, and just like, I don't know, the cliche is you're out near Wolf Creek. Would you be?
No, there's a little further south. Even I didn't go that far north.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
Near the top of the canning, I think.
Okay. But that's sort of like just instantly, not necessarily the Wolf Creek, but you hear the movie and then that would scare, like, does that sort of stuff pop up in your mind?
Well,
like,
for Sophie, it would scare Sophie, but for me, I would be the guy that...
I too scared of people like John finding me.
Yeah.
Two very different experiences.
And
I do remember having this one time, and because I remember listening to all those podcasts. I used to love listening to those true crime podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point before I left, I was like, you need to cut these out of your life because you do not need to be thinking about Ivan Milat and people when you're out there on your own.
Did you have guns or protection?
I did. But then, no one wants to have to use their guns for self-protection. But I do remember I had this
even
time.
for animals or anything like that?
Yeah, for animals, like for wild, mainly like I had them for wild camels out there, which was, I know, a big problem that, John had too.
And did you encounter many problems with that?
Yeah, I had to shoot 5, unfortunately, when I was out there, and that was mainly right out in the Great Victoria Desert.
And as someone who had become so passionate about camels and so... it's such a big part of your life. How did that feel? Because, you talked about how the first camel that you had to shoot was one you'd spent the whole day sort of almost getting to know, and it was, in a sense, pretty difficult. So you must, It
was.
What I found, mate, because I thought and it was probably the biggest thing that I was scared of, actually, like before setting off on the trip. I knew it was inevitable. I thought, it's not going to be a case of if I have to shoot any, from all accounts of other people having done any treks with camels, it was kind of like how many as opposed to whether it's going to happen. And look, I got so lucky actually, because I met some amazing people on the way that it was like these sort of people just turned up in my life or, on my doorstep, so to speak, at the perfect time. And I stopped at one of these stations just before I got to the desert, and I met this guy called Murdoch, and he was just a manager on one of the stations, and I had no idea what I was doing with my rifles.
Yeah.
I'd bought these guns. I had never had any experience shooting.
You had multiple.
Yeah, I had just a 22 basically, which was to sort of practice on cheaply, and then I had the 308, which was the big gun.
Yeah.
And the 308 scared the living shit out of me. It was heavy. I shook when I shot with it, like the ringing in my ears afterwards. I just didn't even want to pick it up. I was that scared of it.
Just the 22 is like I used to use that as a young fella, and as a young bloke, as a teenager, I'm sitting there shooting it. It's quite fine, but I do recall my friend buying the 308, was it? Yeah, and fuck,
yeah.
Difference
It's got a recall, that's
kick,
for sure.
Shoulder,
totally.
Not,
And so I had no clue, and all of these different people and I'd met along the way had given me various bits of advice, and I'd sort of been naively just taken all of them, not knowing what to believe. And someone along the way had told me, you don't want to have a sight on your gun. Take it off. When you'll shoot them, they'll be that close. So I'd taken the sight off my rifle.
Yeah.
And it had no, I'm going to show how little I still know about
didn't
rifles.
have a sight on the top.
But it didn't have like another sight on the top.
Yeah.
So I got to this guy Murdoch's station, and he was like, he happened to be ex-military. He happened to be an ex-sniper of all things.
Oh my God.
And he was like, who the hell told you to take the sight off the rifle? He's like, you might as well be shooting with a stick, or you might as well be shooting blind, you know?
Just turn it over on the side, gangster.
This amazing guy ended up, I was only going to stop at the station for a day. I ended up spending 4 days there where I went through full-on army drills with this guy. He mounted a new sight on the rifle, and he basically taught me everything from the ground up, like all of this stuff that no one had really taken the time to teach me, like how to breathe when you have the gun. And I just always remember him saying, he's like, you just need to practice with it constantly. Like the gun needs to be like an extension of your body. I guess they teach you that in the army. So he's like, every time you get to camp, he said, just get the rifle out, put bullets in it, load it, unload it. Put bullets in it, put it up to your shoulder, unload it. And just do it so like you just become comfortable with picking up this thing. because that's just, I was just so terrified. And, so I started doing that. It's kind of weird, you'd sort of like look through the scope at one of your camels thinking, this feels strange, but just to get that feeling of like, okay, where am I going to aim for on the camel? And so he taught me, everything from the ground up, including, okay, when you shoot a camel, make sure you reload straight away. It doesn't matter if you've hit it and it's dead, reload, approach it reloaded. Make sure you don't approach it from the legs because it could kick, it could stand back up again. Approach it from the hump side. How to check if it was properly dead, put your finger on its eyeball and see if the eyeball moves and all this stuff. So I thought that I would be really emotional when it came to shooting my first camel because it was a full-on thing. But I was actually amazed at how much the adrenaline was pumping so much. And I was so all I wanted to do was make sure that I gave the animal like a quick, clean death. So sort of like I went into this business mode and I was just kind of going over everything Murdoch had taught me. It's like I don't know if anyone's seen.
Where's the best place to shoot a camel for a quick?
Well, because I was not such a good shot, he's like, don't aim for the head, aim for behind the forearm because you're more likely to take it down. And it's full on. So it was evening time. The first camel I shot, it was evening. I'd seen a couple of other camels and they'd sort of just taken off and it hadn't been a problem. And but the first one I shot, it was evening time and I was collecting my camels from grazing and I had just started walking them back to camp and I heard this deep, it sounds like the kitchen sink draining, the noise that the balls make. It sounded like this deep, but good bull camel noise, John. And I was like, I know that sound. And I was looking around for it, couldn't see it and everything. I was like, there's definitely a bull out there. And then all of a sudden he comes striding in from this line of mulga. And I was lucky this camp was pretty clear. It was sort of this big Spinifex clearing and then he was coming in. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, this guy means trouble. He's frothing at the mouth and, tucked up and doula blowing out, which is this big pink sac that they have from inside their mouth. And he just didn't even look at me. He just was coming straight for the camels. And so I tied my camels up quickly and I ran and got the rifle and I got a jerry can and stabilised the rifle on that. And then as soon as he started trotting, I was like, okay, that's it. I've got to.
And how did your boys, your team, react to the first one?
Oh, they were pretty. I mean, they're not so much rattled by the gun. I'd fired off the rifle a few times, so they knew that they were okay with it. It was more the fact that then all of a sudden there was a dead camel in camp that they could smell. Yeah. So it was a terrible night's sleep. I remember they were just agitated. You can, your camel so well. So, I could feel their agitation. They were sort of grinding their teeth and it was horrible. So first thing the next morning in the dark, we were up, saddled up. I was like, we're getting the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Did you ever, one of the things I've been curious to ask, I was told by Russell Osborne, one of the guys who trained me how to handle camels, that they've got this sixth sense, camels, that they kind of pick up if there's some bad vibe around an area and all of a sudden they'll just start to be a little bit hesitant to go forward or whatever, and you're looking ahead and you can't see anything. You're wondering what that is. And we had a moment like that where they were just really weary about going around this blue house. And I was like, is it the colour of the blue or what the hell's going on here? And we get around and at camp that night, I'm asking, what's with that blue house over there? They're like, oh, funny story. There was like a double homicide in that 12 months ago. And I had a couple of moments on the trek like that where I found about the story after going past it, and the camels were freaked out going through that. Did you have anything like that?
Definitely. I had this weird knack of, you start getting, you hear of all these Indigenous cultures and they're quite superstitious. Yeah. I felt all of a sudden spending a long time out in the bush on my own that I started to become weirdly superstitious.
Yeah, right.
So I started to believe, in all these areas where I got a bad vibe or, and I believed that there were spirits out there. And then I also started to think, well, maybe there's camel spirits too. And I had this real knack of always seeming to choose a spot to camp where there was a dead camel somewhere. So there's a lot of, there was a lot of dead camels out in the desert because rangers had come through and they're classed as a feral pest. So they'd come through and it shot camels on the side of the road and so on. And I wouldn't see them at all.
Yep.
And then I'd get to camp and my camels would be really like jittery and everything. Oh, for God's sake, like everyone just calm down. Why are you, what's the problem here? Picked a nice spot with good feed and everything. And then, I'd get them all unsaddled and then they would head off to graze. And then all of a sudden there was one spot I remember distinctly and we found like 20 camel carcasses. Wow. And I was like, God, we're in this like camel massacre zone, you know, and it was this horrible camp where they were awake all night, same thing again. My camels were grinding their teeth and they were just terrified. And I was like, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I'm, stupid human that you didn't see all of this.
And there's a documentary on the sort of cause of that, which is
Judas Camel.
Judas Collar, I think is
Judas Collar.
Judas Collar, and because they're herd animals, they go to get their to go closer to their own kind, and then they would come along, track it along, bang, shoot them all. Big, and I know they're a pest, but fuck, like, and you see this camel get depressed and feel like everywhere it goes, it's
totally,
death
and like, John and I have discussed it too, like it's just horrible to see the waste, they're such, amazingly well adapted animals to our landscape, and so
that's what I was going to ask. Did you eat the camels when you shot, or were you wasteful?
So we've got a friend of ours, and he's this old Don. He's this camel man. He wears
shout out to Don. Still love that.
He still wears suspenders, old Don, and I remember him saying to me, he's like, if you shoot a wild camel, you make sure you cut off that back leg or the back straps or something, and then you can hang it on your camels to dry as you walk along.
Oh my God!
And I was like, God, I can't imagine.
The poor camel.
Exactly. Can't imagine mounting like half a dead camel drying onto my live camels.
But it's funny when Don...
And he would.
When Don was out on the trip with us, we had Brusky, my dog, saw a kangaroo off in the distance, and dog looks up at me and I say, all right, Brusky.
Yeah.
Onto it,
Go.
So he puts his head down and he had enough on the kangaroo to actually get this kangaroo and take it down in front of Don. So Don's like, it's a bloody good dog, that dog. So I casually walk up to this kangaroo and the kangaroo is just looking at me. My dog's got the kangaroo by the tail and spinning it round and round, and the kangaroo's looking at me just like, please fucking kill me. So we dispatched the kangaroo and then Don's straight over, legs off, hang him on the side of the camel, exactly like I described.
I don't think Don believed in my diet of lentils at all. He was like, you can't just go out there and eat grass.
But this guy's like, you get access to a lot of these older guys that are just really into younger people doing this stuff. So Don was an ex-sergeant from Maree, and he turned from sergeant to cameleer, from policeman to cameleer. And he's into camel racing. He's probably one of the best camel trainers in Australia. And but he's, can't walk past a free bit of meat, even if it's been hit by a road train like this. And he talks about the first thing when you catch up with him is he talks about the most recent free meat acquisition or deal that he's got. I did a deal for 2 ducks the other day.
We always, because he still tries to, every time I catch up with Don, he still gives me all this free meat because he's still in this sort of like, you got to put on some condition, girl. And we call it Don's mystery meats because you get it out of the freezer now and you're kind of like, is this camel or is it goat or is it kangaroo?
So my favourite local meats that I've tried, I like kangaroo. You like kangaroo? Yeah, it's rich. It's a rich, like, I don't know if I could eat shitloads of it like night after night after night, but I like it. It's a rich, and venison was quite nice as well. I have always liked that. Obviously, when I was 6 years a vegetarian, I wasn't eating that, but I haven't had any venison or kangaroo since I started eating meat again, and I want to start getting onto it. But I used to go roo shooting when I was a younger man, and I loved the thrill of the hunt. I loved the eating of the food because I felt like that was the right thing to do. If you're going to kill it, you got to eat it. But I hated the actual death. It destroyed me. So I loved the thrill of the hunt. Was incredible. Must feel different when it's not necessarily, we weren't doing it. We didn't need to do this. So we were doing it for almost like a hobby or sounds terrible, but we were doing it for that. You're doing it for, like, are you hunting your own food when you're out there, or are you literally relying on your canned stuff?
I mean, I liked the idea of it too. I mean, not so much, same as you, like not for the killing of it, but I sort of thought, and that's originally why I'd taken the 22. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to, shoot a rabbit and then I could have some fresh meat. Yeah. But to be honest, I don't have the skills to butcher and, cut up an animal. And then also, you've had a long day, and then the thought of actually then having to, like, you've got minimal water too, to get blood everywhere and then have to store this meat and stuff. It all becomes harder than just, getting a can of tuna or lentils out of your camp boxes. So
I mean, we were two people coming out of the city really straight out into this. So
because you learned on the fly, hey, as well.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's if you're a tradie or something, you would have had some set of skills. Yeah. In order to be able to bring something to the table. Yeah.
Like, I didn't have a proper knife, I had a tiny little knife for cutting the camel rope, like I said, that was still on me when the camels took off. But otherwise, I didn't have a butchering knife or anything like that. I didn't have the skills or knowledge.
It's like the Delby of the podcast world, just no skill to do anything.
Yeah. Does the right route.
Yeah, it does work.
Just wing it.
But, that's interesting. I guess, like, so did you cook any of your own food, like eating or hunt while you're at, like, by chance, or just not at all?
What about a fish? Did you pull a few yabby pots?
What? I was like, what oceans was I going past? No, nothing really in the end. Nothing to report of there. Hey, I know, and I felt terrible. Those camels I shot, I would have loved to, use something of them at least.
That is something that I'm leaning towards that I'd like to start to do. And
yeah, me too.
In regards to, like, the whole, the whole vegan versus carnivore debate, what's taken up more? I'd love to hunt for my own meat, or I'd love to do that because, one, I feel like I'd be giving almost. I would have a certain level of respect for the animal giving its life for me, and if it's wild, it's lived its wild life the way it should, and it's probably going to die a far more.
A lot more. You use every bit of it.
And probably
you realise how hard it is to actually. It's not just easy just grabbing a steak from the supermarket kind of thing.
100%. We're so detached from the actual animal that's
from the process.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a fucking bit of meat that's packaged up.
I almost thought how good would be you get people to get a meat license.
Yeah.
So until you go out there and you understand the process, you've been through, like,
have an appreciation.
If you're willing to witness the whole entire process, 100%. Then you deserve the end result. Like, I'm not really a massive fan of people being vegan and pushing it on other people. Yeah. But earning a right to eat meat, I'd be a massive fan of that. Like,
100%.
You are strictly allowed vegan until you earn the right.
To a point, I half agree, and I've been doing carnivore lately. I'm back on carnivore today, actually, back on carnivore. But the whole vegan idea, like, I understand the empathy behind it, and it doesn't end up working like that because they end up killing fuckloads more sentient creatures in the end when they're harvesting the fruits and vegetables and whatnot. But yeah, that whole idea of one animal feeds you for, if you store it correctly, can feed you for months. So you can give it that appreciation. And honestly, the way it's going to die in the wild naturally is going to be fucking far more horrific and painful than one shot to the head or one shot to the heart. Like,
with the camels, some of the camels out there, we will see a camel that's had its whole entire bottom jaw ripped off in some fighting. And if I saw one of those, they generally wouldn't come in to attack. But you're shooting that camel because you're like, that camel's just going to slowly starve,
slowly die, slowly.
Yeah, there's just a lot of, I think you get used to in the outback. There's just a lot more death around in general. Like, it's amazing, even things like fences, how much they kill things. You see goats that have got their head through a wire mesh fence and then, they can't get it back out again and they starve there, or, a leg tangled, emus tangled up with a leg, and some wire. I had to shoot, goats at water points that were obviously sick or, in the process of dying. Yeah. There's obviously, you start to sort of, it becomes a bit more common to see to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, that whole appreciation for the animal, I think it's something to be earned. 100%.
Speaking of animals, you met someone on the trip.
What does that have to do with animals?
Is he bowling next door? Is that what he's doing?
He's gone for a bowl.
I found out he was like the under 18 number 2 in Australia for bowling. So he's like, what am I going to do?
Really? Is that what? Is he actually next door?
Actually
He's having a bowl. It was
like,
pumped.
yes, it's next to a bowling place. Great, I'll go for a bowl.
So good. Yeah. So met the partner. We just met him before. So do you meet him in between? You said this was
halfway across.
So you said this was like a thing of two halves.
Yes, exactly. So I did the whole first whole 6 months on my own, and then I arrived in Coober Pedy after about 3 months out, virtually alone in the desert. Mm-hmm. And because I'd been working with camels down in the Flinders, I knew some people who had camels down there. So they picked me up from Coober Pedy, and I adjusted my camels in the Flinders Ranges with theirs. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, I've been out in the desert for 3 months. Mm-hmm. I just really want to take myself out for a coffee.
Yeah.
And I knew of this tiny little outback bakery in this town of 50 people. And so I went in there for a coffee, and it was November, summertime, so all the tourists have gone. Yep. So it's one of those things, like if you're a new person in town, you stand out massively, Mm-hmm. So I walked in, and there was a young guy serving me, and I was kind of like, I remember being a bit kind of on edge. I was like, oh geez, I haven't really had any kind of
all these feelings
exposure.
I've got a live one here.
And anyway, I realised that he knew the people on the station where I was staying, and so we sort of finished our chat, and he asked me, what I was doing. I said, I'm walking across Australia with camels, and he piped up and he was like, oh, I've done lots of walking. How many Ks do you walk? And I was like, probably about 20 a day. And he was like, oh, well, I did a 40K walk the other day. And I was like, oh, okay.
Trying to one up the camel lady.
Clearly not impressed at all.
Yeah.
And we left it, and he was like, oh, say hi to Paul and Karen on the station. So then a couple of days later, I'm down on the station, and this guy, Jimmy, just appears out of nowhere, just drives into the station. And I was kind of like taken aback. I thought, I guess he's come to see Paul and Karen, his mates there. Turned out, I found out later, he's never been to just visit Paul and Karen, at all. It was clearly intentionally coming to see me. So this developed, and before I knew it, so he was basically, he thought, I'll come and say goodbye to you up at Coober Pedy, and I sort of thought, oh well, this has been a fun bit of a summer romance, but I'm gonna walk away from this. Too far, clearly. If I found out that nothing's too far for Jimmy, so he came up to Coober Pedy. The
kilometres that guy did is insane.
Came up to Coober Pedy to see me off, which would be 600 kilometres one way, at least. And then every time I braked, he came. Probably the shortest distance I was about 300 kilometres away.
Wow.
And then I started going further and further, and I was like, you can't keep coming and, dropping my food out to me.
Yeah.
Soon I'm going to be in Queensland, and you're going to be driving like 1,000 K out to see me.
Yeah.
He was like, no, it's fine. It's just a bit of driving.
So he bog lapped back and forth. Over the next 6 months.
That's
in
love.
and out.
It's like I was about to say that's like no, it doesn't matter.
So I walked close to 5,000 K, and Jimmy drove 16,000 K back forth to see me. And so he'd come back home to the Flinders to the bakery, and he would just go nuts cooking a million pies.
Yeah.
Because he was still trying to run a business.
Yeah.
And then he would, drive out to see me, and then he would come back and be up at like 1 a.m, cooking pies again every day, to stock up as much as he can to get out and see me again.
And he even stopped in to see me on the way to see her.
Really?
Yeah. So as much as Sophie...
I sent him up there. I was like, you got to go meet this guy, John Elliott. He's basically in your backyard, as
Yeah.
in like still another 400k away, you know.
But I mean, so Soph was, I think, the 6th female to walk across Australia. Number 6.
I don't even know. This figure's come
Geo.
out. We're not Australian Geo said that,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we'll go with that. First female to walk with camels, as far as I know,
Wow.
across the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so were you are you walking the
I
whole
walked
way?
the
Like
whole
you don't
way.
get on
yeah.
the back or anything?
I walked the whole way.
Yeah, right.
Every K they did, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, fuck.
And so for 2 camel trains to pass each other.
Yeah.
Now,
Oh.
now that's definitely
Yeah.
a first.
Because you got
Yeah.
just randomly bumped into each other? Is that how that worked? What was happening?
No, we were we were in contact on social media and things, and John had been in Tassie with his camels, and he was coming up to South Australia, and it was when I was in South Australia, and we thought, yeah, exactly. This is, I know it's a big state,
The
but this
locals
is too
would have
good
been
a
just
too
like-
good an opportunity to miss.
So we were kind of saying, I said, where are you? Sophie asked, where are you heading?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't fucking know. That's like a month.
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
a month away.
John never planned anything. I was kind of like,
Yeah. It's meticulous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I started to realise that she's got this perfect plan. So I was like, look, you just send me your perfect plan and I'll walk the opposite way on it
Yeah.
and I'll hit you.
Yeah.
You know, and sure enough, just the other side of Cameron's Corner, we run into each other. And,
That's-
yeah.
That must have tripped the locals out. There goes the cops. That must have tripped the locals out.
We were
Like seeing,
Yeah.
not just
It's like,
one.
how
like,
many of these camel
Like, what
trains
is-
are out there?
Yeah,
God,
what-
is everyone walking camels? Because especially around where we had met up, it was
Yeah.
like we went and dropped in on the same sort of stations and people. So yeah, it was like, oh, we only had a camel train through here 2 days ago. Like
People are going to think
And
this is a camel podcast.
Yeah.
I think.
I ran past 2. So, like William Creek, I also ran into another couple, Rob and Bernadette.
Oh yeah.
And they'd been going for 15 years.
What?
So
Yeah.
they would come back
They just
to
live off the
Gim-
land or just constant trekking?
Or they'd
Just
come back to
always
Gympie,
trekking.
do some work, and then they would hit the road again. But it was basically they were working to facilitate the funds to keep on trekking.
Yeah, okay.
So them as a couple, I'd say they've done more kilometres around
God,
Australia
than probably anyone else.
Than anyone
yeah.
else.
Wow.
They were crazy enough to walk across the country and then go back again.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's that brings up something because you like doing it financially. You had your business, which it sort of helped fund what was sort of going on, I guess.
Yeah.
But what do you do? Like what? Like
Just burnt into savings.
did you just save? Like
Pretty
what?
much.
And,
I mean,
and
I
does
sort
it
of-
cost much money? Like well, I don't know.
I mean, it cost money in the setup. You know, in the probably the biggest one was, you know, feeding my camels for the year while I was training them before I went out.
Okay.
And you know, buying the saddles, buying the, you know, I mean, I made my saddles, but I had to pay for all the equipment and stuff to do that, and all the
Yeah.
trekking gear and all of that. So the setup is expensive. But then when you're on the road, you know, you're not paying rent, you're not paying fuel, you're not paying,
Yeah.
you know, car insurance, or
Yeah.
you know, all
So
of
it's
those
just-
other life things. So
What are you paying? Like
just monthly food, really, you know. And then for me, it was, you know, pretty basic monthly food.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
I mean, it's
not
no
too
different
bad.
to like going on a caravan trip or something around Australia where the setup costs us a fair bit
Yeah.
and then it settles,
yeah.
you know, once you kind
and
of
it'd
hit
be
the road.
fuel and stuff like that. On
Yeah,
that.
you
But you
just-
don't even have that, I guess. So it is.
Yeah, it's pretty
Sounds appetizing to me,
yeah,
actually.
pretty
Yeah.
simple, pretty simple living.
yeah.
But I didn't want to have to, you know, people said, oh, you could get this or that sponsor, or
Yeah.
but I sort of actually didn't want to have any restriction in that way. I wanted it to be 100% my own, and I wanted to be able to, you know, I didn't want to have branding everywhere or anything like
Yeah.
that. And I wanted also to
And
be
this was
able
for
to
you,
turn around.
hey?
Exactly, it was for me, and I wanted to be able to turn around and go, you know what, if I don't want to do it, I don't have to do it. I'm
Yeah.
not, you know, I don't have nothing else is riding on
There's a
this.
bit of and there's you're
Freedom
going out
in
there
that.
for freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Big time.
interested. Do you think, because I think there is with the stuff that I try to do when I challenge myself, or I feel like there's ego involved, whether it's intentional or not. Do you find like it's for yourself? It's not for anything else but yourself. But at the same time, do you find there's an element of
That's
ego
a
attached to
really
it?
good point. Yeah, because especially I remember, you know, when I was out there on my own, and you know, you're writing a diary about your day or whatever, and you start to feel like, does anyone know I'm even out here?
Yes.
You know, like you've set off on the trip to it. It's not like, you know, now where I've written a book or you know, you've got more of a social media presence and stuff. You're sort of out there going, does anyone give a shit or care or know that I'm out here? But then, like you said, it's like it shouldn't matter.
Exactly.
Because you're doing it for yourself, you know, but yeah, I think it's amazing how that creeps in there, that like, but I'm going through so much hardship that I need someone to know how much hardship I've been through. Yeah. You know, and I think it's important, I think, to come back to that and to go, no, you made the decision to go out there and yeah, you're right, and it's for you. And we were actually talking about with Jeff about there's this movie that's come out on Netflix and it's called The Alpinist. And
I love it.
Oh, great
Fuck,
movie.
that is incredible. Yeah. Heartbreaking, but incredible.
Heartbreaking, but incredible. Exactly. And what I loved, and I watched it recently the other day, and I thought, yes, how good is it that this guy, you know,
kid
he just is doing it. He's climbing these mountains because he loves it.
Yeah.
He genuinely loves it.
He didn't
and there's
make the
no
doco.
need. Exactly. Like he didn't even want to be in the doco, and he wanted to have that. And there was a part of me that a bit from sort of film and TV background, I was kind of going, it'd be cool to make my trip into a doco. But then if you have a doco, you know, you have all these people involved. Yeah. You know, and you have people traipsing you around, and then it doesn't become that solitary, you know, I hate the word, I hate sort of saying finding yourself, but like that, you know, getting to know who you are and what you're made of, and, you know, that solitary experience.
Because imagine you would have pictured a little bit of what the finish or life after is going to look like when you're setting out. Like you've got rough kind of ideas, you know, and then it's very different when you get out the other side. You kind of, you know, the person that emerges from the end's not the same. So what was some of the things, you know, that contrast between what you thought it was going to be like at the end versus the reality of the end of the trek? And
that's a good question. I think there's not a lot. I think there should actually be more sort of said about the come down from adventures. Yeah. You know, there's so much of this sort of this hype around finishing an adventure, which is so funny because really the adventure is what happens when you're throughout the whole process, you know. It's not the last day when you reach the beach at Byron Bay, but there's this hype that builds to it and everyone's going like, oh, you know, are you excited about finishing? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? I got how you feeling 1,000 times, and I remember I thought, if someone asked me one more time how I'm feeling, I'm going to crack it, you know.
But it must
because
be a feeling of loss.
You don't know how you're feeling, exactly, and it is. It's a sort of heartbreaking feeling of loss because you suddenly realise this whole thing that has taken so much of your focus and your life away. You know, I mean, it was 2 years of walking, but it was 4 years of before that learning camels and learning, you know, what I was doing with these big animals. So it was this huge chunk of my life that I'd been dedicated and focused on that. And then all of a sudden that's coming to an end, and it becomes this sort of like, well, who am I after this adventure? And
an
it's
empty
sort of
feeling?
It's sort of like a bit of a downer, and I think it takes a bit to sort of find yourself after that again, you know, almost, you're sort of left going, okay, well what now?
And you can't resume back to the you from before. Like, so you've lost the comfort of the trip, and you've lost the comfort of who you used to be. And the void after is just like, people are asking you who you are and asking you what you took from it. And you're like, I haven't even figured that out.
And then they're asking you, what's next? That's the next question you get, what's next? And you kind of think, God, I've just done this massive thing. Can you just give me a break and let me kind of, work out what that meant for me, you know? And I think it's, you know, it's still, I'm probably working out what that meant, you know, what that trip meant and what it was about and what I discovered from it.
No shit, over like the last few weeks and then the next few weeks you've been horse riding in Kenya, then you've flown to Perth to speak at an event, then you went off to a station on the goldfields to meet some people from the camel trek, and you come back and you're like, oh yeah, John, we're going skiing in Victoria.
I've never been very good at doing this.
So pick a fucking lane, Sophie.
Jimmy was joking just the other day because, he was saying, first of all, like he was basically saying my inner monologue, which is constantly like, I can't wait to be settled. Oh, I just want to travel. I can't wait to travel again. Oh, but won't it be so nice when we're settled? Oh, but I don't know whether it's a good idea to be settled. Like, it's constantly this up, down. I
think that's what life is. It's a constant flux between seeking that sense of adventure, but also security. So it's and that's why, I mean, I love the idea in my head, I love this idea of an uncertain journey of not knowing where I'm going, but there's also an uneasiness about like, what if it doesn't pan out the way I want? So you do like that,
and I think
level of security, but
home and knowing where home. I think I've become in my life such a chameleon. And able to fit in with different places and different situations.
Yeah.
But the cost of that is then, not having that security of that feeling of like, well, where's home and who am I, normally.
So what do you replace that with? Are you replacing that with people and relationships as opposed to a location?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more, I think it's got to be almost like an okayness with who you are, like an internal, like an internal sense of home, I guess, and an internal sense of, I think, I've really struggled with, you want we want to carve out an identity for ourselves. Like I'm, John, the, insurance broker, or I am, such and such the filmmaker, or I am such and such the, we tend to define ourselves with our jobs, so... But I think it's okay to be like, I'm Sophie that likes doing a little bit of this, likes doing a little bit of that, likes changing my job here, likes changing where I live there. Yeah. And that's okay, Like,
I think that's the thing that everyone can learn from in any way is just being okay with things changing, being okay with... So people like who... I used to push the whole preach, chase your dreams and be happy and blah, 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 blah. All that fucking cliche bullshit. Now I understand that, it's great. Chase your dreams. Fucking go for it. But you got to understand, you're not always going to be happy. You're not always going to be sad. You're going to have to, just have to be okay with the fact that sometimes shit happens and then you can get around it. It's that yin and yang. You can't appreciate the good times without the bad times.
Yeah, definitely.
If I was constantly traveling, I'd get homesick. But if I was constantly home, I'd want to be traveling. So the whole idea of potentially, hey, I stick at home for 3 or 4 months and then I go on a little trip or I go and challenge myself. If I was constantly doing it, you get bored.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the flux of life. Totally. That's the entertainment. That's what keeps us going, I believe.
Yeah, and I think with all adventures, that little bit of hardship makes you appreciate the good times even more, and I guess you probably find this with your ultra marathon running, like to have that hardship, how good do you feel at the end of it, and it's like a tough day camel trekking. I always say it's like you can have the shittiest cup of tea at the end of it in a tin cup that's probably but it tastes like the best thing in the world because you've been through a rough time. You appreciate you start to appreciate the smaller things.
I love the way Jeff described it. You got to squeeze the lemon hard enough to get the pips out.
Hard enough to get the pips. 100%. But like even at the end of that 100, like I had this feeling of achievement. But this feeling of loss. It's done. Like that's probably for a day or so I felt like, fuck, thank God it's done. But like after that I was like, the whole build up, the whole training, the whole challenge I missed. And I think investing everything into that's what it has to be is the mistake, and understanding that it will come to an end.
Yeah, it will
and being
come
okay with that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there will be something
another
else.
Thing. Yeah. Exactly.
For some people, like yours is both of you is an extreme example of adventure. But for some people, it might be, hey, I'm going to go try a new restaurant tonight.
Totally.
It depends on what your level of comfort is and pushing the boundaries.
You realise that there'll always be someone doing something bigger and something smaller than you. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what your form of adventure is exactly, whether yours is just, going for a local bushwalk or something like that, because they'll I know, I think what I've done, I might think that what I've done has been, this huge adventure. And then you meet people like Jeff and I go, Jesus, it looks like what I did is like, a walk in the park. Yeah. Like, there's always people pushing the boundaries more. I think it's just looking at what you're capable of, and then going, how can I put myself out there into that little bit more sort of, push my own boundaries? What is it that I'm not comfortable with, or what is it that I want to explore more in general,
And people, I think, are often, people have put themselves in this situation where they're constantly comparing themselves to other people instead of perhaps and I think, I can't remember where I heard this, but comparing yourself to the person you were yesterday. Yeah. And as long as you're potentially moving forward or trying to improve yourself, that's, progress is almost equal to happiness.
I mean, when you complete an adventure like Sophie and I have, then all of a sudden you're in the room with other people who have done things even more amazing. Yeah. And if you buy the $1 million boat, you pen it next to the $1.5 million boat. Like, so every level that you unlock, you surround yourself by people who have unlocked the next level. So you're never in a room that's good enough. So if you go through that competitive and comparative mindset, and that's your measuring stick as opposed to your inspiration to take the next step, then you're never good enough. As opposed
100%.
to as opposed to comparing yourself to the day before.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're taking those little baby steps every day, I think you're But I find myself I'm avoiding telling people things. Like, you can see someone will be like, that will be at a barbecue and people will be chatting, and someone will say, I did this marathon and it's 21 or half a marathon, 21 Ks. I felt so good. And you can see this level of achievement and the level of happiness and pride they've got. And so I'll avoid even bringing up that I've run 100 because it's an asshole thing to say. It's like, they're just sitting there spruiking like how much hard work they've done. There's always something. And if I said 100, one of my mates just ran 187 kilometres in 27 hours. Like, there's always someone who's doing more than you. Like, so I try not to bring up some of my achievements now in front of other people because you can see that's their level, and then if you rub it in their face, I've done more. That might maybe it sets them back. I think you're always just in a battle against yourself.
Maybe we could remind Jimmy of that. If a girl comes in and says, "I've just walked halfway across Australia," don't just say how much you've walked.
I think Jimmy goes by the theory. He used to, when he was coming up to see me, he'd often go up the Streslakey track and he'd stop in and he'd see the local publican there at the Lyndhurst Hotel. And Laurie was 77 at the time, and Laurie's advice would always be like, you just got to keep trying, young fella, and eventually they give in. So that's always been Jimmy's advice that he's stood by, and it's worked for him.
I'm interested because we spoke about solitude and finding yourself and all that sort of stuff. You are, early on, you're by yourself, and you've probably never been in these sorts of situations. John said in his episode that you found yourself coming to the end of a complete thought, and not faced with all these distractions. Yeah. What were you finding when you were completely by yourself? No humans around for months. Where did it end up for you? What was going through your head?
Yeah, I was actually amazed at how clear my thinking was. I think, like you said, because you don't have all this distraction of like, I've got to, quickly go get a coffee before work, and then I've got to send that email to this person. This person, I need to transfer money to that person or pay this invoice. Like, you got 100 different things in your head normally on a given day, or and then couple that in with social media and all of that information that's sort of coming in. Yeah, and it's amazing how well your brain and memory works when you sort of give it a bit of peace and quiet almost. Like, I started to remember stuff that I hadn't remembered in years, just things with friends, encounters with friends, or just, whatever, all these just memories surfacing that I hadn't thought about.
Well, that's just because you're away from the 5G.
That's it. Oh, the beauty of being away. I always think
could you feel a difference being away from all the radio signals and stuff, like, because some people say they can feel a bit clearer. I even feel it when I go out to and that's probably just the silence and the sound. But even when I go out to York, out near where you've just bought it's quieter. It's easier. I don't know what it is. Like,
I started to get really you you almost become like an animal, as in like your senses are heightened.
Yeah.
You know, so you start to sort of hear more and see more, and then and I remember a couple of times where I'd been out on my own for, you know, a week or so, and then a car would come along, and I'd be fully on edge like an animal. Like I'd be like, oh God, I can hear something. Oh my God, who is it going to be? And, you know, just that feeling of anxiety rising that there was, you know, something not, you know, natural coming into my space. So it's funny. It's funny what it does to you.
Your senses really turn on.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the podcast, but you become more in tune even with your own body. You're feeling parts and you know, a niggle that's starting to come up before it comes up, so you can correct. But you seem to be tapping into and listening to a whole lot more of what's around you and also internally as well.
Do a lot of talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I did a lot of talking to the camels, and then probably talking about yourself. Yeah. You realise you've been away too long, I think, when you start to tell yourself jokes and then laugh at your own jokes too.
I heard it's like, you know, speaking to your animals is fine. It's when they start speaking back.
Yeah. That's when it's not okay.
What did you start to feel like you were going crazy at points? Because it's a long time to be alone.
What about your donation to the gods?
Yeah. I started doing some weird stuff out in the desert, you know, like like that superstitious thing. I started feeling really weirdly about, so like I said, there was that spot where there was all that massacre of camels, but just before then I'd picked up this camel skull out in the desert, and I thought, oh, this would be really cool to take home. I'll decorate it, you know, and it'll be, you know, it sounds morbid, but, you know, I thought it'd be a fun, you know, thing to have. And so I strapped it on top of one of my camels. I had this dead camel skull riding, you know, on top of my camels. And then I started to get weirded out by it, because then I kept choosing these sites with all these dead camels. I kept thinking, maybe I shouldn't have taken this skull. Maybe it's like bad juju following me around because I've got this camel skull on me. And, you know, all this stuff is just like playing in your head, which is like you'd never, you know, normally rationally you never even think about this stuff, but, you know, it's just turning over in your head. And I started doing this other weird thing too, where like I'd have my cereal in the morning, and then I would get to the point where I just couldn't eat anymore, and I started just throwing it out and sort of like as a like donation to the spirits of the camp.
Oh my, wow.
It was odd.
But it's amazing the things that your mind does.
Yeah.
Like, and the places it takks you. Like, I'll sit there
totally. And when I wouldn't do that, then I'd be like, oh no, I'm going to get bad juju because I didn't give them an offering of my muesli. Yeah. You know, it's like, what the hell?
And you could see how religions are created. You're out there for long enough. You're like, wait a minute, no one's told me what God is or what... I'll just make it up.
Yeah.
My God is the cereal God.
Yeah.
You know, and someone else's God is the camel head God.
100%. I thought the same thing.
And they're doing things.
Yeah.
And they're exacting their will on
surely
me and the world
this
around
storm
me.
has come because of this thing, you know, that I've made up.
Because it feels comforting to people that life's not completely out of their control. And if they feel like they have some sort of control, I think that's what religion, dogmatic religion is. It's for comfort for people.
And why people have an attraction to religion during such troubling times that they're experiencing in their life. You know, I don't have control. At least there's this one element that I can understand a little bit more.
And can control, Would you realise that there's actually, you know, there's very little out there that you
no control.
can control, you know. You're at the mercy of everything.
And that's probably why we're at the mercy to those thoughts, I imagine, so much more about the creation of something to believe in whilst you're out there, because we bust out of that protective bubble, and the next minute we're like, all of those safety features that we have grown up with every single day of our life have just disappeared.
Yeah. I tried to control everything. Like I would walk along and I would think about, you know, I'd go over and over like phonetically about what's the right word?
Phonetically.
You know, all these figures in my head. I'd be sort of thinking, okay, I've got this many litres of water. When I pull up at the next water point, you know, I'm going to give this camel this many litres of water to drink, and that camel this many litres of water to drink. And then I'll fill up with this many litres, and how many litres will that be at the end? And I'm going to walk this number of Ks, and there'll be this number of Ks to the next distance. And I would go over it and over it and over
again
it
and again
and again to the point where like, I know this.
Yeah.
It's actually not important. I've got it written down. And little book, you know. You don't need to be thinking about this again and again. But I would spend, you know, because, you've got that time and that space to you know, go a bit nuts over it, you know.
Until the last day of my the last day I was still calculating, all right, well, I've got to be in this part of Geraldton this time, that time, that, you know. And I'm not shaking that thought after 3.5 years.
Yeah, my one is actually because we've had some rain in Perth overnight, last night. I still do the like, oh my God, it's raining. Is everything undercover?
Yeah.
You know,
wow.
I still get that lying in bed in a house. I'm like, is all my gear undercover?
And driving past like a bit of a side of the road where you're like, oh, the feed there is really good.
Oh, yeah. John and I always talk about it.
That'd be a great
we have
spot.
camel vision. It's like, the camels would like that spot. Oh, that's a good spot for feed.
And you think the exact same way. So after I passed Sophie, so I'm walking along her track, I'm like, she's designed a good way to get through this spot. So the most planned part of my whole entire journey was when I was following what Sophie did. And so I'm going through, and I have no idea where she camped though.
Yeah.
And I would just go, that spot there looks pretty good. And I'd pull up, and then I'd go to get my firewood, and within 3 meters, right, is exactly where Sophie's camped.
You can see all my camel tracks.
I've got roughly where she went, but she's like, I just went down that river system down here. So I don't know exactly where she went. And even the way I'm trying to cut through the bush, I'm like, that looks like a good way to get through.
Yeah.
Now we're in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, and I've just chosen to walk between the same 2 trees that Sophie walked between. Like you just see the landscape and what's in front of you the exact same way once you've got this camel vision on.
Yeah. And I think like you guys talk about obviously trying to control everything. But it's the listeners will get sick of me preaching wu wei, but wu wei is the idea that you can't control everything. You can have a vision, you can have a goal.
Oh,
you can have vision. you can have vision. You can have a goal in life. But if or you can have a destination or whatever. But like, let's say that water situation. What if you spiked one of the jerry cans on the way through and it empties, and then you don't have those things. So it's all about just you have that goal, that vision, that direction in life or in a destination or in a journey, but it ends up being you can't control external factors. Yeah. So all you can do is like, I'll keep moving towards that, but that's come up now, so I might need to go around. I might need to change what I'm thinking. Hey, this new path in life has excited me. I'm maybe going to take that one for the next 2 months. I know I was planning on going there, but this has come up. So I think that's exactly what people need to start. They don't need to do anything. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say you need to start doing anything. But I think if people thought a bit more like that, instead of trying to control every little detail and just going with the flow of it, not working against the universe, going with the universe, you'll be a lot happier. The path of least resistance is always the best.
Definitely, yeah.
And it can often lead to some pretty exciting things.
Totally, yeah. You definitely find out, there might be some little things that you can't, like after the camels took off on me, and then actually, when I ran into Murdoch, that guy that taught me to shoot, because he was ex-army, he actually drilled into me. He got wind of, I told him the story about the camels had taken off, and he was like, okay, we need to set you up for success here going out into the desert. So it was like, you need to have on you every single day, you need to have your camelback of water, you need to have a lighter just in case you need to start a fire, you need to have your pocket knife on you again, your phone and the sat phone, and the EPIRB. Yeah. So every day when I set off, these were exactly the one thing that I could control, safety-wise, and I took that really, seriously, and I was kind of always like, okay, water, phone, sat phone, EPIRB, lighter, pocket knife, and I would list them every single day. But then, you realise all of the other stuff you can't control. And it took me a long time to start to live in that sort of day-to-day experience rather than looking towards the end destination. I would sit out there, in the Great Victoria Desert, and I'd see, on my maps, I would, there'd be a little GPS spot of where I was, and then I would zoom out and zoom out and zoom out, and there was nothing around except so daunting. Like you see the topographical lines of the sand dunes, and it would just be this huge sea of them. Yeah. And I would be marking the distances going, oh my God, I've still got another 1,000K, you know, like, and it just feels like it's just never gonna end.
And there's
know?
so many moving parts. Like, you know, you've got all these camels to take care of, and there's all the saddle. So many areas for things to go wrong. Like, other than when you lost the camels, like, how'd you go being a vet, and you got to almost be a part-time botanist? Like, how did you go adjusting to what the camels could eat? Like, and that crash course of when you're out there, you've seen the pictures of these, you know, plants in the book. And you've got to look out for, all right, I think that's the one that's not poisonous. And, and you hear about a saddle store, but you treat one for the first time when you're out on the track.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're making it all up as
you're a botanist. How did you go?
Yeah. Well, I loved being a botanist, actually. I became fascinated. I think one of the nice things about walking through country is that you really get to see the fine detail and stuff. And I think that's for me, that is the beauty of the outback. I will never fully enjoy just driving through the outback, I think, ever again, because it's just it's a blur when you drive past in a car. Like, what I love now from the camels is just taking it slow and being able to identify all the little flowers, being able to see exactly what things grow in what soil. Like, it's amazing how much you pick up through observation. Like, wow, there's all these different types of ants. Like, I had no idea how many different types of ants there were, and ants have a bedtime. There's a time that the ants go to sleep at night, you know, and all these little things that you're sort of just starting to observe and become a part of, you know, where the stars are in the sky, when the stars are coming up, you know, what the moon's doing and everything. And so that was a massive, you know, beauty of the trip. But yeah, like you said, you're a vet too, you know, you're having to do that. I remember my camels got sort of probably towards the end of the desert, it started to get hot, and camels get this bizarre thing. It's called a botfly, and it goes up their nasal passage. It's this big grub about this big. It's just disgusting, about, you know, a couple of inches long, and it doesn't really affect them, but they sort of do this funny face. Like, you can tell it's sort of itching their nose afterwards. And anyway, I gave them injections to try and get rid of it, and camels are huge hypochondriacs, and I had this day where I'd walked, like, I don't know, it was one of the longest days I had walked. It was like 28 Ks, which I know John probably did longer days than me, but yeah, this is a big day. And then I was, you know, in the evening tying them all up to tiny bushes and trying to strap their legs so that I could give them injections, and Jude, who's my favorite camel, just turned into this absolute monster, and he's trying to bite me and kick me, and you think, like, it's not that big a needle, mate. Look at the size of you. Like, surely it's not, you know, throwing up cut all over you, and you think, why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah. Well, I'm conscious of your time because you have a flight to catch. So we'll just finish on this because I am very interested, and you both would be preaching this, I guess. And Jeff was very big on this, the resilience stuff. So obviously, having gone through an experience like this, you must be ultra resilient. And has it carried on into your sort of day-to-day life? Like, do you look at it in a contextual way and go, this is nothing compared to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's something that you still constantly have to remind yourself of. I think it's something that you can, you know, you start to get a bit soft again, I guess, when you go back into, sleeping in a bed and, you know, under a roof. And I think you do have to remind yourself. I've always been someone, I think, that sort of can emotionally fall apart a bit. And I know there was a day early on when, after that, like I said, that first month out was really hard. The camels were losing weight. You know, it was hot every single day. The flies were horrendous. The feed was bad. Everything was bad. And, you know, I got to another one of these campsites where there was no food for the camels. And I had thought that I would be going on this sort of fun, happy, exciting adventure, tripping around the outback, and wouldn't that be fun? And I thought, this is horrendous. And I remember, you know, my camels slumped down because they were just, you know, dejected because there was no food for them, and they sat down in the shade, and I curled up in a fetal position and just cried, you know, and then I remember just sobbing and going, I'm so sorry I've taken you on this awful adventure. It's all my fault. But you start to realise too that, like, there's no one else that's going to pick you back up again. It's just you out there. I think I'd always look to other people like to comfort me, you know, and there wasn't that. And I was the only one that could keep on moving. And you suddenly realise as well, although you're out there alone, you're sort of as well a bit of a team leader. You know, you've got these big animals who are your responsibility to look after. And so I sort of pulled myself together and I pared it back down to basics. And I thought, okay, I'm not sick. The camels are not sick. No one's broken a leg. You know, it's not that. We've got food. You know, I've got water. Tomorrow we're going to get up and we're going to walk to the next spot, and tomorrow will probably be better. Hopefully we'll get to a better camp.
Yeah.
And I really took that and I've run with that through the whole thing, just taking it back. I call it, you know, taking it back to basics and going, it's not that bad in the reality of things, you know. And when the camels ran off on me too, it was like, it's, you know, it's okay. You know, none of them have broken a leg. You know, we just need to slowly, regain control. I need to sit down, take a breath, have a cup of tea, and then we're going to retrace our steps back to the phone that I've lost on the ground. It's going to take some time, and we're going to do, you know, and we're going to keep on moving. And I thought at the beginning of my trip, I thought that it would take me a year. Like I said, I thought, you know, I'm going to go on this great adventure across Australia. I'll be able to knock it out in 9 months. It'll be fine. And I realised after they took off on me and after I learnt that hard lesson that I was like, you need to slow it down. It does not matter. It's not a race across the country. It doesn't matter how quickly you get across. What matters is that you just actually enjoy every day, you know, and just, you know, put one foot in front of the other.
I love that. It's an awesome journey of resilience and just I think we talked about the solitude and doing it for you. And I think that's probably the most important thing, obviously, understanding that ego plays a role in everything. Yeah. We all want to put a nice photo up on Instagram. I'll do it all the time. And I've said this before, I'll go climb a mountain. If I really just wanted to climb the mountain, I would climb the mountain and not tell anyone.
Yeah.
And there's out to Uluru where Sophie spent some time, there's a guy out there, Chris Hill. He has assisted me halfway through the trip and assisted Sophie a lot.
He's probably my biggest mentor, actually,
to get us onto these trips. And he's said he's always happy to help someone who's just going to have a crack at it. But there's so many people that come in and like have these big dreams and talk up a big game in regards to doing a camel trek. And I've come across a few. I'm sure you've come across a few now as well. Still haven't seen anyone else even take the first step yet. There's one girl in Queensland will probably do it. Katie, I reckon she'll get off and do it. German girl, but there's a lot of people that sit on the fringe of it. It's a bit of an idea, and then after a couple of years they just disappear. So the people in the whatever industry or adventurous field or whatever, if they see someone who's genuinely going to have a crack, they're generally more than happy to help. So if you're looking at getting, everyone's got a camel trek inside them. It's not necessarily a literal camel trek, but you engage with those people out there like that have already done it. You know, if you want to learn how to play tennis, don't get a fucking swimming coach, right? Go to the right person, the right field, and just pick up the phone, shoot out on Insta. And if that person doesn't answer, go down the list, hit the next person. Like you can get the support network you need to take on any adventure you want.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I felt, you stay curious. I think, you're curious to learn something, and you realize that, everyone has something to teach you. If you just keep, looking for those people that are, and everyone's generally like willing to teach you.
Yeah, if you want to start like your own podcast, just come in and take someone else's idea. Right? Like there's people out there that will do this shit every day.
100%. It is, I call it now, after receiving this message, I've just got the picture up. Everyone's got their own monster inside them. You were just making reference to it, and I'll read you this because this is a nice way to finish up before we plug a few things. This was sent to me. Every single one of us has a monster that lives inside of us that causes a ton of stress, anxiety, and frustration. The workout you don't want to do, the conversation you don't want to have, the diet you said you'd start, the task you've been putting off, that's your monster. Until you go out and face it through urgent and aggressive action, it will keep getting much stronger, scarier, and more powerful than it actually is. The reason why you have days where you struggle and don't feel like doing what needs to get done, you allow your monster to run wild. Quit feeding it and start taking action to eliminate the motherfucker. You are in full control of what needs to happen. You just haven't been exercising that control. And I like that.
I love that.
I think
that's awesome.
Well, you all do have that monster in us.
Yeah.
And for you guys, it's a camel trek. But for some people, it's just, the diet that needs to start tomorrow or something like that.
And you mainly find, I think, that the monster is actually in your own head.
Yes.
You know, the monster is bigger and scarier in your own head. And when you actually,
100%.
Start tackling that monster, it's not as bad as you think.
Well, you think about anything you've ever been putting off or wanting to do, and the moment you do it, whether it's ending a relationship or whether it's starting a podcast or whatever it ends up being, the moment you just start or do that first step, that weight off your shoulders, that feeling of freedom and relief, you're like, fuck, this is, of course I should have been doing this, you know? So
and then it's immediately replaced by the next monster.
Exactly.
But John and I do always say, because so many people came up to us when we were trekking saying, I could never do what you do. And it's... And
I look at them like, you got 3 kids, fuck that.
Exactly. I can never do what you do.
That's 18 years. This is a couple of years. You're a lunatic. Why?
Easy.
Fuck, that's good. All right, thank you so much. I am conscious you got to get on a flight. So do you have anything you want to plug before we finish up? And we'll definitely get you guys back on.
You wrote a book. Let them know.
Yeah.
I did write a book. My
ego
book's
serving.
Called, I know. Just after we talked about ego, here we go.
Yeah.
But I did write a book, which is also, I never thought that I would write a book, actually. My book's called The Crossing.
Mm-hmm.
Take that, English teacher.
And I know. When I was in high school and everyone thought I wouldn't go anywhere or I wouldn't become a doctor or a lawyer. It's actually,
and I can't even fucking read.
You can go on a different thing. So my book is called The Crossing and it's out in most bookshops at the moment around Perth and stuff as well. I've seen it in some great bookshops. So it's pretty exciting and pretty, I feel pretty proud to have this beautiful physical copy of my trip out there in the world. So. And
maybe we can, I've got a couple of extra ones that Sophie can sign and maybe give away to the couple of the Patreons.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that'd be incredible. Patreons. Yeah, we might do a little competition for that for the Patreons or something like that. Fuck, awesome. Anything for you to plug, Johnny?
No, mate. Just the old sign behind...
Old trades. That's pretty good. I don't have much to plug. I'm on Thursday night at Comedy Lounge doing Gong. That'll be fun. Might try a new couple of jokes. We'll see how that goes. And then I'm also, not that you can come, I'm MC for the Triple M Sports Quiz at Crown next Wednesday night. I don't think anyone can just come. That might just be a Triple M thing. So maybe I didn't need to plug that.
Now you put the invite out there.
But yeah,
I'm coming now.
And just keep an eye on my socials because I'll let you know if I'm doing stand-up anywhere. Delby's in Edinburgh, so check out his stuff. He's doing really well. He's going really well.
He seems to be having a ball.
Yeah, he's definitely enjoying it. He said he's improved since last year.
I notice every single person that's like on his socials posting about, it's an amazing show. All chicks.
Yeah.
It's all like, it's the most incredible performer.
So that's different, isn't it?
Yeah. Nice one, Delby.
But he's doing well. Cam McLaren, Matt Storer, actually, who the listeners would know, he's over there doing shows and he got laryngitis and he's a singer comedian. So it hasn't gone well. He's had to cancel about a week of episode of shows, and I think Joe White, Cole Legacy, they're all over there. A whole lot of the regulars from the show. So if you're over there, we're going well on the UK chart. So there must be some listeners. So get over there and support Delby and the boys, and enjoy that. So. Aside from that, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, John, for inviting me over to WA too.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun, and and we'll get you back on when you're over again at some point. So,
sounds good.
Cheers.